Hi everyone. Today I want to continue on with some brief discussions of recent Criterion releases in summer of 2022. And today I'd like to talk about Mr. Klein. And this is a 1976 movie. It's directed by Joseph Losey and it's starring Alain Delon. And Mr. Klein is a story about a doppelganger. There's two Mr. Kleins. One is a art dealer, very well-to-do, living in a posh apartment. This is 1942 Paris. And the other Mr. Klein is Jewish, and he is in a perilous condition. And so this is a story, it's a variation on the double story in that it's kind of like the opposite of identity theft, where Mr. Klein appears to be foisting his identity onto the other Mr. Klein. And so that's one element of the film, is trying to understand who's doing this to the Alain Delon Mr. Klein, the rich art dealer, and who is behind it all. What's the motivation? So we have the double story, and then we have the historical context, which is 1942 France. Jews were about to be rounded up in June 16, 1942. About 14,000 Jews were rounded up in Paris and taken to the Vel d'Hiv, which was a big athletic field, and held there when they were, and soon after taken to detention camps, and then most of them were taken to Auschwitz, where they met their deaths. And it was all done by the French police. The Germans had no part in the gathering up. The buses the public buses were used, and the French took women, children, old people, sick people. They had a list, and they went from apartment to apartment. Nobody being left behind. So we have this ominous, gloomy kind of atmosphere surrounding this story of this double of the Alain Delon. Mr. Klein is now in danger of becoming the Jewish Mr. Klein. And in fact, the authorities believe that just by trying to prove that he isn't Jewish might be a ruse by the Alain Delon Mr. Klein to escape his actual identity, if it were Jewish. And we have a crucial opening scene that sets the tone for the whole movie, because it doesn't have anything to do with the Alain Delon Mr. Klein story. It's set in a doctor's office, and we see a naked, middle-aged woman being examined, probed by a rather indifferent doctor who's just, what he's doing is he's trying to identify Semitic tendencies in her body and in how she walks, totally indifferent to the humiliation that she is going through. And there's a whole waiting room full of people that are full of other presumably Jewish people that are going to be examined in such a manner. And then the other crucial scene in the opening is when Alain Delon gets a knock on his door at his apartment. There's a man there desperate for money. He's got a beautiful work of art that's been in his family for generations, but he's got to sell it. He needs money badly, and Alain Delon is this rich art dealer. He's indifferent to the plight of this man, and he's going to try to get this piece of artwork for as little as he can possibly get. So here we see kind of Delon as the vulture, and there is, in the opening credits, we see a vulture being pierced by an arrow. And later on, he's also there's also another reference to people as animals, and again, vultures. So then, immediate following this, Mr. Klein finds a Jewish newspaper with his name and his address delivered to his apartment, and he wants to find out how could this actually happen. And he finds out when he goes to the newspaper office that he is now on the list as a subscriber, which incriminates him greatly because the authorities have access to this list. So there's definitely the Kafka-esque element to it. Losey in the supplements, the archival supplements, tries to downplay that. He said, "I made a big deal of it with the servant. He regretted that when the servant was a big hit for him about 10, 15 years earlier." But there's no denying Mr. Klein, with the K, common letter used by Kafka, and Joseph K in the trial, who is also being accused of something that he is innocent of. He doesn't even understand what he's been accused of. So we get this this Kafka, and Kafka was writing in metaphors, whereas this has a real social reality behind it. But we also get a good dose of Bertolt Brecht, and Losey was a kind of a disciple of Brecht. Losey was a theater director in the 1930s. He joined the Communist Party, and that's why he had to leave after the war and the McCarthy and the investigations of Hollywood, the Red Scare. He was on the list, so he went to England. But before he did that, he staged Bertolt Brecht's Galileo in L.A., a real memorable performance, theater performance that starred Charles Laughton. So he's very much in tune with Brecht, and Losey is often accused of being a very cold director. And there's some truth to it, because he never, even in his early Hollywood films, he was not making the traditional film where you identify with the character and you feel his pain. Brecht had the alienation effect for audiences. He didn't want us to identify with the characters. He wanted us to watch it, to analyze it, to come to our own conclusions about characters. But that can lead, especially in a commercial cinema sense, that can lead to what would appear to be a coldness. And Losey's theater career really plays also into his films, and especially in this film, because as many theater directors were, they were very much aware of the decor and how characters navigated around a decor that would fit the emotional needs of a scene. So Losey, his first champions were in France, and they championed that mise-en-scène, that ability to do long takes, very much in a theatrical manner, with limited amount of cuts. Losey came to the project through Alain Delon, who was the producer of the film, and they had a couple years before had made a movie called The Assassination of Trotsky with Richard Burton. And Delon, in Losey's career, Losey's reputation was very high in France and really all through Europe. So he thought of Losey to make the film. He brought the screenplay to Losey. Delon had been making what he thought was run-of-the-mill cop movies, and he was kind of tired of that, and he wanted to make a really good film, and he thought this screenplay was fantastic, and Losey would be the perfect director for it. And so Losey brings aboard Alex Trauner, who is a legendary set designer. It goes back to Fritz Lang's German expressionist movies, and to The Children of Paradise in Paris, to Billy Wilder's The Apartment. This is just a beautifully designed film. And also the cinematography, Jerry Fisher, and also they all mentioned Pierre William Glenn, who was the camera operator. So Losey loved to have very intricate camera movements, and he did some handheld camera work too. And Glenn was reputed to be the master of all that kind. He could shoot anything. You tell me what you want, how you want it shot, and I can do it. So we get a lot of long takes where, you know, the camera, it's almost invisible. It's so smooth, these long takes. And in the supplements, Michael Cement, who wrote a book on Losey, probably Losey's greatest champion. We get an archival interview with Losey by Cement, but then we get a 2021 interview with him that goes on for quite a while, about 30 minutes, and that's just great because he really understands Losey's work. And then we get another interview, Alain Delon. Again, excuse my pronunciations. He was the editor. And again, this is a recent interview, so it's great listening to him reminisce about his work with Losey and how well he got along with him. He thought it was the best movie he ever worked on. Alain Delon believed it was the best movie that he was ever in. And when it went to the Cannes Film Festival, it didn't make the jury. That wasn't even part of the jury selection. But in the Caesar Awards, the movie did win for Best Picture. It did win for Best Director, Best Art Direction. But Delon was denied. And Delon is fantastic in this movie. I mean, he is just, he's in almost every scene. And he's also ably supported. They got John Moreau for what's little more than a cameo. Excellent sequence. Juliette Berteau as his girlfriend / mistress. I missed her in the opening credits, and I thought, boy, she's got this a small role, but it's a crucial role, but she was really good. And now it was Juliette Berteau, who was in Celine and Julie Go Boating. I also, the Alain Delon, Mr. Klein, has a lawyer who's trying to get birth certificates from grandparents, because that was crucial. Just one of your grandparents was Jewish. You were then considered Jewish, and his wife is played by Suzanne Flan, who was in Flower of Evil. Claude Chabrol, a video I did on a Claude Chabrol movie where she's very elderly in that movie, but it was great to see her sort of in her prime. I didn't recognize her at first, and I knew she was in the movie, but when she get wrapped up in the movies, and then I was, oh, of course, that was her. And then in the supplements, they showed scenes with her, and you could really see, that it was indeed Suzanne Flan that ultimately is in The Flower of Evil. She was quite a beauty in her day. And we also get a documentary, a full-scale 90-minute documentary. It's called Story of a Day, and it goes over all the events of that day, the roundup of the Jews in 1942, June 16th, 1942, and we see some of the survivors. There were a few survivors from that era, and it goes through with the complicity of the French Premier Pierre Laval, and because it was all organized. The Germans didn't want to do any of this, and the French wanted to have their autonomy, so they, no, we'll do it. And Laval, who was just a scurrilous figure, the Germans didn't want anybody under 16 to be rounded up, but there wouldn't be enough to meet the quota, and Laval said, no, everybody goes. Little kids, infants, everybody goes. So, and then tragically we learn in this documentary that the children, the Germans weren't expecting them, so when they didn't know what to do with them, so as soon as they got to Auschwitz, they went straight into the gas chambers. Story of a Day is a tough documentary to get through. I almost bailed out, especially when they get to the part about the children. So some good artwork here. But if you can bear it, the Story of a Day has a very pungent message, I think, to give on the subject of racism and indifference, and how people people are indifferent to other people's suffering. They outside of their own family, their own friends, how easy it is to look away. So it's a grim movie, but it's just so beautifully made. Alain Delon, and you know, he was, I think, 40 years old here. Still good looking, but you can see the aging coming on, and you can also see his total dedication to this role. And he was very disappointed he didn't get the Best Actor award at the Caesars. So another very significantly different kind of artwork here. Certainly it depicts Paris. This is not colorful Paris. This is a sort of green-gray view of Paris. And it continues on in the interior of the physical release. And then we get a booklet with an essay by Jeanette Vincendeau. I believe it is Vincendeau. Very good, as all of them are. And it's actually readable, for me at least. The black and white is readable for me. You can read them on the Criterion Collection, or the Criterion website. And it continues on. I particularly like this. You see the movie, this particular artwork really resonates. Okay, so thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.